Salt, a seemingly humble and ubiquitous mineral, expends its energy, undergoes transformative changes, and remains abundant on our planet. It serves as a vital lifeline for humanity, bearing the radiant brilliance of human intellect. We trace the footprints of salt across Africa, Asia, Europe, and America, transcending regional boundaries, intimately connecting with human civilization and the chronicles of salt's history, observing the interdependence between humans and the earth. Within lies the essence of cruelty, courage, and fortitude, giving rise to poignant tales of the bond between man and nature. This is the tale of salt and earth, salt intertwined with life, salt for existence. Karaguda village is located on the edge of the Desada Desert in northwestern India. The villagers have been making salt as a living for generations. This is Jibu Prasad, the head of the family. Faced with big trouble, he has to seek help from the deities to get him through this difficult time. It is the last days of May. The time nature leaves him is running out. The June monsoon is coming. The wind will bring heavy rain, the desert will be flooded, and the rain will wash away his salt pans. But the salt, produced by his family after a year of hard work, still piles up like small snow-covered mountains. Even if all the family members are mobilized, they cannot collect all the salt. The salt is supposed to be loaded onto the buyer's trucks in exchange for the family's living expenses. However, there is not enough time.
And जो तारीख है छेली लास्ट तारीख आती है इस तारीख के अंदर हम निकाल देते हैं तो उसकी जो बाहर निकाल दिया जो नमक है उसकी जिम्मेदारी खींचने की व्यापारी की होती है कोई आफत और धुआं है बारिश से जो गिर पड़ता है ये जो पिघल जाएगा यानी नहीं खींचेगा तो उसकी जिम्मेदारी व्यापारी की है
From June to October each year, the Desada Desert in India floods. The rainy season brought by the monsoon ends in October. The blazing sunshine evaporates the rain. The desert reveals its original landscape. Here comes the busiest days of the year. Hundreds of families from nearby villages come in trucks with their wives and children, carrying basic daily necessities and setting up tents in the desert. To make salt, they will stay for months. For generations, the Jibu family has lived on salt making in this desert. Such a primitive method may be rarely seen in other parts of the world. Dhiran Prasad, Jibu's eldest son, is the main laborer in the family. The father and son first create new salt pans in the desert and stamp the ground flat. The salt produced this way is free of impurities. The underground brine is pumped into the salt pans. Then it's up to the sun. The monsoon is blowing, the sun is blazing. The force of nature evaporates the brine little by little. The higher the temperature, the greater the brine concentration, the larger the salt grains, and the purer the crystals.
जो रण में काम करते हैं, ठंडी में काम करते हैं तो पैरों में हाथों में ठंड लगती है, वो बुखार आ जाती है, वो सर्दन की बीमारी आ जाती है, वो कमर की बीमारी आ जाती है। और जो धूप में काम करता है तो शरीर के सारा जलन होने लगता है।
Only at dusk can they call it a day and relax a little with their family. After a year of hard work, the Jibu family harvests large white grains of salt. Other villagers have already collected their salt, sold it to the merchants, and been paid. In Jibu's judgment, in just 2 to 3 days, the rainy season will arrive. The Jibu family has many salt pans, but only a few people to work on it. They are afraid that they cannot collect all the salt. If it rains, the quality of the salt will be affected, and the salt will not sell at a good price. Diran, the eldest son, has complaints about the family's situation. Since the salt price remains unchanged, the income from salt production cannot sustain the family. His 2 younger brothers do not want to work on the salt pans like him. They both work in the salt works, where the pay is slightly higher. The family has a dozen salt pans, producing hundreds of tons of salt every year. Such a heavy workload is handled only by him and his father. This is a mission impossible. Diran expresses his opinions. He urges his father to hire some helpers. It will cost some money, but better than to have all effort wasted. According to Indian tradition, such a big decision must be made by the father, the head of the family. Whether he and the son take risks and work around the clock for some days, or pay to hire some help, he cannot make up his mind. Before 6 a.m. the next morning, Diran, the eldest son, comes back from fetching water some 30 kilometers away. He finds a dozen helpers in the salt pans. Obviously, after a night of hesitation, Jibu has no choice but to take Diran's advice. Diran knows how much his father hurt to have made this decision. Hiring helpers costs nearly 1/5 of the total income, but it takes only a day to collect all the salt. The yield is guaranteed, as is the income. Without helpers, if the salt cannot be collected, the year's effort will have been in vain. In fact, for Jibu, it is a bit like gambling. Maybe he spends extra money, but the weather will not turn out as bad as expected. Salt making, which is for fit large-scale production in this remote desert, ultimately is conducted by men and women carrying it by hand or on their heads. Indeed, in most parts of the world, large machines have already replaced this primitive method, but Jibu and the villagers seem to have never considered making changes. From Jibu's perspective, handmade salt is good. Jibu learnt the method from his grandpa. His grandpa's grandpa did the same thing. Jibu feels that he should do the same as well. Jibu's grandchildren see this place as a natural paradise, the salty snowflakes their playground. This is a relatively happy time of year for the children. They needn't attend school and have little supervision. Jibu's daughter-in-law is preparing lunch, roti and curry, traditional Indian cuisine. It's also what they've eaten the last 6 months. The Jibu family finally collects all the salt before the rainy season. To do the maths, hiring helpers costs extra money but increases output, so it makes sense.
पहला हम 1.5 कटा करता था, हम 500 से 550 टन बना सकते थे। अभी 1 साल का 800 टन बना सकते हैं।
कितना पैसा मिलता है?
समझो 800 टन में हमारा गुजरान भी चलता है। बारिश जो गिर पड़ती है तो हमको नुकसान में
On the other side of Earth, descendants of another ancient tribe are also struggling to obtain salt in their own way. On both sides of the Lansang River Valley, at an altitude of 2,300 meters, lies the salt pans of Markham, Tibet. For 1,200 years, the Nashi people live in Jiada village on the west bank. They produce red salt. Tibetans live in Yanjing village. They've been producing white salt for generations. Ancient reddish-brown salt pans and mottled salt racks record the arduous quest for survival of this salt-making tribe. Until now, the Nashi people living in Jiada village on the west bank still keep this way of making salt. Salt is not only a necessity for life, but also a faith engraved on their heart. Sering Eugen, 32, is the woman with the most salt pans in Jiada village. 10 years ago, when Eugen wed a local man, she assumed a significant workload. As the menfolk in the village left to work elsewhere, the women were saddled with the majority of household tasks. Intelligent and resilient, Eugen swiftly acquired the skill of salt production. Today, Eugen's mother pays her a visit, with the intention of persuading Eugen to inherit over 20 salt pans from her mother's estate. However, Eugen already possesses 30 salt pans, and acquiring more would most certainly overwhelm her. If she assumes responsibility, despite the modest earnings, it can somewhat supplement her family's income, making Eugen more fortunate than her mother's generation. In the past, women had to manually transport the brine, a time-consuming and arduous task. But now, pumping alleviates women from the most strenuous labor, though it introduces the risk of electric shock. Electric wires crisscross the salt pans, and Eugen's closest companion lost her life due to an electrical shock. Expanding her ownership of salt pans entails heightened peril to her life. And what further deters Eugen is that the surging tourism in recent years has adversely affected the ancient salt wells. Across the river, Eugen possesses a close companion residing in Yanjing village, where the landscape is elevated and rugged, rendering salt production more challenging. With the emergence of alternative employment prospects, most women decide to quit salt making. Gyagya noodles, a regional buffet. Each bowl contains a single mouthful. When you finish, another is served. There is unlimited supply. In a bid to entice customers, Zhuoma, the proprietor, devises a creative notion, counting bowls of noodles using stones as a measure.
地方是做盐帮忙，是一天才能赚到40块钱，是很不错了。如果是这边打工的话，是一天可以赚到100块钱。虽然活的话是干得苦一点，但是还可以赚点钱。
Tourists relished the local salt-infused gyia gyia noodles, prompting a rush to purchase the salt itself, resulting in thriving business that fills Zhuoma with delight.
这是白盐是吗？
啊，对，
这是你们当地的这个产的红盐啊。
对，红盐、白盐，这个叫桃花盐。
哦，它这有什么功效？
这呢是腌肉、腌菜、泡脚，有脚气和那个脚出汗的，这个特别有功效。
Sering Yuzhen discerns that, although the salt wells are geographically remote, their renown is spreading far and wide, enticing numerous individuals to journey great distances to witness the salt pans. The Zhuoma sisters operate a flourishing noodle shop, earning good wages. Yet, without the salt pans being operational, tourists would cease to arrive. She diligently tends to the salt pans, and perhaps in the future she could establish a hotel, anticipating prosperous business prospects. According to Yuzhen, despite enduring hardships, it would be worthwhile for her 2 daughters. However tired or busy, Yuzhen is a creature of habit, dressing up for the weekly village dance. This is the most relaxing moment for those salt-making women. With the increasing tempo of the music of Xianze, these hard-working women feel relaxed. After pondering for a week, Sering Yuzhen arrives at a resolution, assuming responsibility for 52 salt pans. Her husband's 3 siblings are pursuing higher education, and her 2 daughters will also leave for their studies. An additional salt pan translates to supplementary income. "1,200 years ago, salt compelled Yuzhen's forebears to settle in this river valley, and now the scenic salt pan landscape attracts tourists, providing the descendants of salt makers with a livelihood. Yuzhen and women akin to her, who uphold the traditions, are safeguarding the present state of affairs." The salt-making process is arduous, yet occasionally imbued with delight, finding solace amidst hardship, approaching life with a positive outlook, embracing everything with serenity and vigor. Perhaps this is the existence Yuzhen and women akin to her must face. The Dakar Rally, where rally teams traverse thousands of kilometers, journeying across the Mediterranean, through the Sahara Desert's expanse, until they ultimately reach the race's culmination, Dakar, Senegal. But on the other side of the dunes, it is a whole different world. a pink oval lake lies peacefully amid the desert. Rare are the individuals who have laid eyes upon a pink lake, and those who venture to Lake Retba on Cape Verde's eastern Atlantic coast shall be captivated by its stunning hue. The element responsible for this enchanting shade is none other than salt. In contrast to numerous salt lakes globally, Lake Retba's salt is not merely a crust atop the surface, but rather crystals accumulated at its depths. The growth of Dunaliella salina algae on the lakebed during the period from December to the following January imbues the water with a velvety pink complexion, the element responsible for this enchanting shade. The lake is quite shallow, on average only 1 meter deep. For thousands of years, the Retba people living by the lake have continued their peculiar way of collecting salt. Nahu is by the lake, wearing a commemorative rally t-shirt. This t-shirt seems to be an honor for him. He's 19. Now he's getting ready for the day's work. He carefully covers the scars on his skin with glue and plastic bags. Then, with extreme care, he applies an oil. Including on his private parts. Such preparations ready him for the extremely unique way of mining salt here. This is the cheapest and most effective protection. Now Nahu enters the saltiest lake on Earth. The small boats lined up on the shore are engraved with surnames indicating private ownership. Salt miners like Nahu do not need any mechanized tools, just a small boat, a spear, and a few large buckets. Salt collectors stick long sticks at the bottom of the lake to mark their work areas. Nahu's friends have already started mining salt. The pink lake has low visibility. One can only smash the salt crystals deposited on the lake bed by hand. When collecting salt, one is almost completely covered in water. While the collection of salt may seem inexpensive, enduring prolonged immersion in salt water is a torment beyond the capacity of most individuals. Despite Nahu's meticulous application of ample oil beforehand, occasionally, due to imperfect application, the water corrodes the body, leaving behind lasting scars. In addition to superficial injuries, the biggest harm Nahu faces is that years of soaking in salt water can make him infertile. In the past, the Retba community gathered salt using a family-oriented approach, with men responsible for its collection and women tasked with transporting it. However, presently, the earnings from salt mining have plummeted, and the demanding labor conditions have driven away a lot of people. Emmy's husband went to work elsewhere. The shore witnesses the arrival of salt-laden boats, where Emmy and her companions have been patiently anticipating. At 40 years old, Emmy assumes the role of leading the salt carriers as they load the damp salt into buckets. Retba women, since their childhood days, have borne the weighty burdens on their heads. In a mere few trips to the salt flats along the shore, several hundred kilograms of salt are transported aboard each boatload. For each bucket delivered, they record it with a shell. The money is calculated by the number of shells. These women deserve admiration, as lifting those hefty salt loads proves challenging, yet they can carry it atop their heads for an entire day. It appears that women across the globe shoulder the burdens of life, much like the salt-laden buckets atop their heads. Yet, from their faces, one discerns a positive and optimistic outlook on life, despite its hardships. Indeed, such is the essence of life. Sorting the gravel and debris, after manual iodization, left drying for a few hours, the salt will turn white. In half a day, it will become a commodity, shipped everywhere. Senegal is the largest salt producer in West Africa. 1/3 of the salt is produced by hand, supplying domestic and neighboring markets. The Retba people collect salt from November to early summer. For the rest of the year, they find odd jobs or simply do nothing. Their existence relies on Lake Retba. This meager harvest is all they need to survive. The highly anticipated Dakar Rally, occurring annually, appears to have influenced the livelihoods of numerous individuals in far-flung regions. However, the lives of the salt-mining Retba people, such as Nahu and Emi, have remained unaffected by the shifting tides of the world. These days, within Heijing town, Yunnan province, people from various locations converge here every weekend. While historically, this region served as the foremost salt production hub in Yunnan, and the scent of simmering brine perpetually wafted through the town. In the northernmost part of the town, the only ancient salt-making workshop in Heijing is preserved. From the Ming and Qing dynasties to the Republic of China, this was the core site for salt production in Heijing and the source of Heijing's wealth. Huge water wheels, tiered brine drying terraces, and sheds where the brine was boiled are testament to the town's past prosperity. The ancient method of salt making is the most unique experience in Heijing. Place Heijing salt in a small pan, carve your Chinese characters on the flat and smooth surface of salt grains, bake it over a strong fire. Once it has dried and assumed its form, envelop it in red silk, complete with the official seal. This salt production technique, prevalent during the late Qing dynasty and early Republic of China, now feels like a bygone era, yet it continues to captivate tourists. The most representative ancient building in Heijing is Chastity Arch. In the middle, it is described as the Chastity and Filial Piety Memorial bestowed by Guangxu Emperor. It's easy to assume that the women in Heijing were confined to the bedrooms or kitchens, but history tells us another story. Salt making had long been a male-dominated profession. The men stirred the brine day and night in the stove rooms, adding wood and making salt. But such tiring manual labor did not suit women whose feet were bound. This was an important stop on the ancient Tea-Horse Road. As an important stop for caravans, Heijing had long been associated with danger. The men in the town left home for a long time to transport goods. Dead or alive, no one knew. Many women were like widows with no source of income. These stories are not such distant memories. The elderly on this street were all salt makers. Yang Chengzhen is the oldest woman in Heijing. Her husband died when she was young. She had to support herself and her sons by smuggling salt. That said, she seems reluctant to mention the old stories of what women faced in Heijing. He Piju, 80, grew up in a family of salt workers. His father was in charge of boiling brine. In his memory, he still recalls numerous stories from the past. These stories happened about 60 years ago. In this small town, closely involved in the revenue from salt making, the high profit of smuggling salt gave these women who couldn't legitimately enter the salt industry some hope. The Wuma Bridge at the entrance of the town was the only access to Heijing. Anyone who entered or left Heijing would be interrogated to prevent salt smuggling. Strangely enough, smuggling salt in Heijing continued despite prohibitions. During the day, the salt workers in Heijing were naked while boiling the brine. At night, the women in Heijing took out their woks in the kitchens to secretly make small batches of salt. The women kept such actions a secret. Due to the history of female participation in the Heijing salt industry, this salt was also known as woman salt. The foot-bounded women who lived hundreds of years ago for survival were closely connected with woman salt. The reason why women could participate in the salt industry was closely related to the brine carriers in Heijing. For extra income, in addition to the amount required by the government or the proprietor, they would sneak some brine and resell it at a low price to the women in Heijing, the main source of smuggled salt. As night falls in Heijing, vendors eagerly await the arrival of patrons. Prominently displayed are diverse salt-based handicrafts, abundant evidence of salt's former pivotal role in this place. Nevertheless, a century ago, during Heijing's nights, such bustling activity was confined to the realm of women's kitchens. Late at night, it proved opportune for women with bound feet to vend salt. In order to evade scrutiny from the anti-smuggling squad, they'd often clandestinely disguise themselves as expectant mothers.
他把绑起来，拴起来，一扇窗起来，那是大肚子婆娘，你可冇得肚子的，你不可能。那些女人嘛都厉害呢，那些小嘎子嘛，以前嘛不值钱嘛，过活了。现在大人们挖那些冰那样嘛，啊，还有那10个盐上冒个嘎子给他，一2个嘛冒2个给你。 妈，你家的话到了厂这边的，我的真都是这种啊！我娘说是过关的时候是你呢，男的你别把嘛过关。
At night, some decades ago, the bound-footed women of Heijing, to make a living, went out to smuggle salt. It took 6 days to get from Heijing to Kunming. They did not stay at hotels for fear of being interrogated. They had to choose a dangerous path to climb mountains and cross rivers, slept and ate in the wilderness, even facing the risk of falling to their deaths or drowning. To survive, in the traditional domain of men, they smuggled salt to support themselves and their family, leaving behind a home they could not return to. In the present day, the women of Heijing no longer rely on salt production for their livelihoods. Men venture outside the town for work, while women, along with the elderly and children, tend to farming and animal husbandry. Although Yang Chen-jen chooses not to dwell on past occurrences, salt remains a vital part of her life. Memories of the salt-braised chicken she savoured as a kid persist in her mind. On her 88th birthday, Wu Duo, her eldest son, plans to treat his mother to this long-lost and cherished Heijing dish. According to legend, salt workers once pilfered a chicken from the storeroom proprietor. After slaughtering the chicken, they were afraid of being detected. They concealed the slaughtered bird amidst the heaps of boiled salt, giving rise to a unique dish. Nowadays, people can rarely eat it. For one thing, it requires several pounds of salt. And secondly, because families lack the requisite utensils to prepare this special dish. Wu Duo has a chance to show off his skills in the kitchen of a friend's restaurant. The chicken is covered in so much salt and cooked for almost 2 hours. Yang Chen-jen delights in a distinct flavor, delectable bones, crunchy skin, a chicken of tender and velvety consistency. The essence of yesteryear appears to resurface. For life's twists and turns and the ebb and flow of the world are unpredictable, yet the taste ingrained in memory endures to this day. Salt may be minuscule, as light as pebbles, yet salt can be weighty, whether it be for a salt maker, a salt carrier, or an individual who consumes salt. For this tiny handful of white granules, it has, at times, reduced the essence of existence to its barest minimum. This is a salt worker. This is also a salt worker. This is still a salt worker. These are all salt workers. Wordless photos possess such vividness that compel us to decipher the narratives concealed within. This photo exhibition, called 1,000 Miles of Salt, is held at the Royal Salt Works in the south of France. People come in an endless stream. They come here for nothing else, just to see these weather-beaten faces. These photos were taken by a couple, Katarina from France and Seydou, who hails from Senegal.
On est parti voir les travailleurs du sel du lac Rose, donc Redba. Et arrivé sur place, on a eu un coup de cœur. Et on a voulu commencer à faire ce travail sur le sel, qu'on a trouvé que c'était des travailleurs qui travaillaient beaucoup plus durement que tout ce qu'on avait pu voir ailleurs. C'était un choc dans le sens où on n'avait jamais vu des gens qui travaillaient si dur. Mais pourtant, avec le sourire.
5 years ago, they visited Seydou's hometown by Lake Retba in the hinterland of Senegal. To their surprise, this ordinary trip turned out to be a new starting point for their art. Subsequently, they began a 10-year photography project. The people they photographed all live in the most inaccessible places on the planet. To this day, they still talk about those trips with a sense of wonder.
Donc, on cherchait sur Internet, dans les pays où on voulait aller, où est-ce qu'il y avait des travailleurs du sel. Et il n'y avait jamais d'informations parce que ça n'intéresse pas les gens en général.
The Danakil Depression in Ethiopia is near the Somali border and a restricted military area. Access to each tribe requires local permission and even protection by the tribe's armed police. In deserts in Africa, the best hotels are open-air tents and simple beds. They had to endure extreme conditions. There, they often experienced despair. Although the environment is harsh, they faithfully record the salt miners there. This is the most gratifying point for them. Their third stop was South America, in Peru's Sacred Valley. There are Inca salt pans that use natural brine to make salt. The small ponds where the salt is dried on terraces, covering the entire hillside. Salt workers there are almost all women. They have a typical South American indigenous appearance. This fascinated the couple. But when they raised their camera, they were rejected. Because local custom holds that cameras steal people's souls. After some communication, they made a funny offer.
Et là, c'est là que cette histoire a commencé. Je dis, je vais voir vite le chauffeur qu'on avait. Je dis, est-ce que tu sais où on peut trouver du Coca-Cola? Il me dit, oui, oui, mais il faut faire des kilomètres. Alors on est reparti très loin chercher Coca-Cola, on est revenu. Et là, elle accepte d'être photographiée, mais qu'est-ce qu'elle fait? Au moment de prendre la photo, elle me dit, c'est bon, tu peux la prendre, mais elle se tourne. Et elle est comme ça. Et elle n'a jamais voulu de face, alors que moi, ma passion, c'est photographier de face les personnes le plus possible, des gros plans.
The couple has traveled to many countries. They plan to photograph even more places. In 20 years, they want to visit another 30 countries to photograph salt workers. Tibet has always been their dream destination. To realize this dream, they have to keep working for a while to raise enough money.
Du moment que la tradition du sel continue à durer, malheureusement, quand ils seront plus là, je pense que ça risque de s'arrêter, puisque les jeunes, je ne pense pas qu'ils veulent faire ça.
Rather than saying that Katerina and Seydou are photographing these salt workers, it's more accurate to say they've found a spiritual connection with them. Time has carved lines on their faces. The camera captures this, freezing it in time. Their photographs allow salt-loving culinary enthusiasts like us to engage in conversations with salt makers, transcending the limitations of time and space. In various corners of the world, individuals must dedicate their entire lives in pursuit of salt, encountering intense hardship. However, amidst their struggles, there's also joy. Through salt, they craft melodic hymns that celebrate the essence of life.